Hello, friends. Good morning. Today we are going to enter into a new topic based on our course syllabus. And as we have said, we are going to deal with the topic of globalization from a multi-dimensional aspect. So, globalization has several dimensions. You have the political, you have the economic, you have the social, cultural, technological, and others. So, in this lecture, we are going to start with the political dimensions of globalization, and we will explore the meaning of citizenship or global citizenship, what it is to be a citizen in a globalized world, and we will also study from a conceptual point of view the different elements of the contemporary world, which is we will discuss the meaning of the state, what is what is a nation, what is a nation state, and how do these states operate in a global order, and how globalization is facilitated in this manner. So sit back and relax and listen to our lecture, and perhaps later on when you have your own questions, you can post your questions on the chat box and we will try to answer and deal with your query. Globalization is changing the traditional concepts of citizenship and the role of the state. Traditionally, citizenship has been tied to a single nation state which provides identity, rights, and legal protection to its people. But in today's globalized world, these boundaries are becoming more fluid. People now often hold dual or multiple citizenship, and migration has created more diverse societies. At the same time, international organizations, global corporations, and supranational laws are changing the full authority of the state. So the modern nation state is not disappearing, but it is adapting. It now shares power with global forces, making the relationship between citizens and their states more complex. So, simulan po natin ang ating discussion sa araw nito. And as I have said, we need to understand three important terms in order for us to be able to have a working knowledge of the political dimensions of globalization. Kasi sa pag-unawa ng political globalization, kailangan maintindihan natin yung kung sino-sino itong mga player sa international relations at ano ang pakahulugan ng mga terms na to. Kaya in our academic purpose, we refer to the nation state as the primary actors in international relations. Pero kailangan maintindihan din natin kung paano nagsimula itong tinatawag natin na nation state. Saan siya nagsimula? So itong nation state ay hinango siya sa dalawang term, yung tinatawag natin na state at yung tinatawag din natin na nation. So sometimes in some literature, the word state and nation are loosely used, and sometimes they are used interchangeably. Sometimes they say state, sometimes they say nation, and sometimes they mean the same thing. But for academic purposes, we have to differentiate the state and the nation in order for us to be able to arrive at the meaning of the word nation state. So, we begin with the understanding of the meaning of the state. So, what is a state? A state is a political entity, or it is a political jurisdiction with a defined territory, permanent population, government, and sovereignty. So there are four important elements that constitute a state. So for a state to be called a state, it should have a definite territory. It must have a permanent population. itong population na ito ay hindi siya dapat yung um, nagpapalit-palit. Dapat meron siyang permanent population. Then there must be a government, and at the same time, there must be sovereignty. So pag sinabi nating sovereignty, this is a concept of jurisdiction and concept of power and supervision. Kumbaga, sovereignty, ibig sabihin, the state has full control of their territory. Kaya nga ang state nag-i-impose siya ng buwis at nag-i-impose siya ng mga regulations kasi ito ay kabahagi ng kanyang kapangyarihan. Kaya kung tayo ay nasa isang bansa or nasa isang state, hindi natin masasabi na we have total freedom and we have total right to our properties kasi kahit yung mga properties natin ay tinatax ng government, and sometimes even the practice of certain professions, kailangan merong kang license or permission from the government to practice such. Yan po ang yan ang ibig sabihin ng sovereignty. So therefore, for a state to become a state, it must have territory, it must have a population, it must have a government, and it must have the power of sovereignty. So that is what makes a state a state. And take note that the state is a juridical concept or a juridical identity. Kasi pag sinabing juridical identity, meaning to say legal identity. Kasi pag sinabi mo, for example, France, China, the United States, Singapore, Indonesia, these are examples of states. Yan. They have a certain kind of fictional personality. We treat them as if they were persons, but in reality, they are not persons, but they have a fictional identity owing to their to this legal concept. Okay. So, itong the origin of the state has been the subject of debate among political philosophers, historians, and anthropologists. There are several theories that attempt to explain how states emerge, and I am going to give you some of this theory. I think there are 9 of them, so I will briefly explain one by one. The first one is the divine right theory. So itong theory nito, naniniwala siya na the state was created by divine will, meaning to say, the king or the emperor or the ruler derives their power from God, and therefore their authority comes from God to rule. And so therefore, since their power to rule comes from God, they cannot be questioned, and that anything, if you rebel against the king or the emperor, he has the power to punish you. So this actually is the basis of this political theory. And this kind of political theory, and this kind of political theory was very prevalent during the medieval ages. Okay. So the second theory is the social contract theory. So ibig sabihin, ang state daw ay nagsimula dahil sa kasunduan ng mga nasasakupan at sumasakop. Okay. May mga iba-ibang theory noong unang panahon. Halimbawa, si Thomas Hobbes, isang English philosopher, sabi niya, sa simula daw, ang mga societies are anarchic because everyone possess freedom, and since they possess freedom and the choice, and sometimes this freedom leads them to commit violence. Yan. So they commit violence and they surrendered their freedoms to a powerful sovereign, and because ibig sabihin, because of this freedom, nagpapatayan sila. So sabi ni Thomas Hobbes, na-realize daw ng mga tao na hindi sustainable yung kanilang freedom. So therefore, they have to surrender their freedom to a ruler, na itong ruler nito, siya ang mag-direct ng society. And he called this in his literature the Leviathan or the monster. Yan. So the people surrender their freedom to this Leviathan in exchange for security. Ito naman si John Locke, isa ring English philosopher. Kumbaga siya ang isa sa kinukonsider na pinagmulan ng modern theory of democracy. He proposed that individuals form a state to protect their own natural rights. So like for example, they would like to preserve their life, their liberty and property. And according to John Locke, itong tatlong values ng mga tao ay mapipreserve lang ito kung sila ay nasasakupan ng isang state or if they would organize themselves into a state. So therefore, this is a contract between the people and the ruler, which is basically the democratic principles. So people elect their rulers, and there's a condition that the rulers will rule, will protect these rights, and if they will not protect this right, the people have the right to a revolution. Okay. Then you also have si Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Si Jean-Jacques Rousseau is not an Englishman, but rather he was French, and he advocated the social contract theory based on a popular sovereignty where the government derives legitimacy from the general will of the people. Then you also have the force theory. This theory suggests that states emerge through conquest, coercion, and a group of leaders impose authority over others through military strength, leading to centralized rule. And many empires, such as those of Mesopotamia and Rome, expanded through military conquest. Then we also have the evolutionary theory. Now, this perspective argues that the state gradually developed from a primitive family structures. So as families grew into clans, then tribes, and eventually larger political units, the need for organized leadership led to the formation of the state. Then fifth, which is the economic theory, or we call this the Marxist perspective. So Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels argue that the state emerged as a tool for the ruling class to maintain economic control and suppress the working class. According to Marx, the state exists primarily to serve the interest of the bourgeois and maintain class division. Then six, we have the psychological theory. Some scholars argue that the state emerged due to the innate human need for order, authority, and security, and humans naturally seek leadership and hierarchy, leading to the formation of governing institutions. Then we have the geographic and environmental theory. Some theories suggest that states arose due to geographical and environmental factors. For example, fertile regions such as the Nile, the Indus, the Tigris, Euphrates, river valleys allowed for agricultural surplus, leading to population growth and social complexity, which necessitated governance structures. So, the origin of the state is likely a combination of these theories rather than a single cause. Early states developed due to the interplay of social, economic, military, and environmental factors. Understanding the origin of the state helps us to analyze its evolution and functions in contemporary global society. And later on, we will explore other terms connected to this. So, as a review, to help us be reminded, uh, the state is a juridical concept. It's a juridical concept, and the state also has a fictional identity. So, in order for a state to be considered a state, there are four important elements. First is territory, then second is population, third is government, and fourth is sovereignty. So, what are the powers of the state? The state has the power to enforce the law, it has the power to control its territory, and it also has the obligation to engage in international relations. Okay, let's now deal with the term nation. A nation is more than just a political entity. It is a group of people who share a common identity, often based on culture, language, history, and ethnicity. Unlike the state, which is a political and legal entity with sovereignty over a territory, a nation is primarily a social and cultural concept. So take note that a nation is primarily a social and cultural concept. Now, to identify a nation, you can look at the following characteristics. The first one is common culture and identity. A nation is often defined by shared cultural elements such as tradition, customs, religion, language, and social practices. Example: the Japanese nation shares a common culture, including traditions like tea ceremony, Shinto belief, and a unique writing system. Then second, shared language. A common language helps unite people within a nation, fostering communication and national consciousness. Example, the French nation is largely unified by the French language even before the country was politically centralized. Third is common history and heritage. A shared historical experience, including common struggles, victories, and myth, help build a national identity. Example, the Jewish nation has a shared history of exile, persecution, and survival, which unite Jewish communities worldwide. Then fourth is shared territory, but not always. Yan. So a nation may be tied to a specific homeland, but some nations exist without a defined state or territory. Example of a nation with a state. The German nation is largely represented by the modern German state. Example, a nation without a state. The Kurdish nation is spread across Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Syria, but it lacks a recognized independent state. So kumbaga, nakadisperse yung kanilang population sa iba-ibang bansa like Turkey, Iraq, Iran, and Syria. Yung mga Kurdish people na nakatira sa Turkey are Turkish citizens, yung mga nandun sa Iraq, Iraqi citizens, pero they have a singular and unified identity which they can identify themselves as Kurdish. Then number 5 is political aspiration, or what we mean nationalism. Okay, many nations seek self-governance or a political independence which can lead to the formation of a nation state. So example, the Scottish nation has political movements advocating for independence from the United Kingdom. Then number 6 is psychological and emotional bonds. A nation is often defined by a sense of belonging and collective consciousness where people feel a strong emotional attachment to their community. So example, the Filipino nation has a shared sense of identity despite of linguistic and regional diversity. So again, to summarize, to recall again the things that we have said, pag sinabi nating nation, it has the following characteristics. Number 1, common culture and identity. Second, shared language. Third is common history and heritage. Then number 4, shared territory. And number 5, political aspirations or nationalism. And number 6 is psychological and emotional bonds. Ngayon ay mayroong iba-ibang uri ng mga bansa or the types of nation. We have the ethnic nation, then we have the civic nation and stateless nation. Ethnic nations, these are based on shared ancestry, language, and culture. So this nation, they share the same ancestry, They share the same language. They share the same culture. Example of this are the Basques of Spain and France. Yung mga Basque or mga sa Spanish Basques, sa English Basque. These are ethnic groups which they consider themselves as a separate nation, but their population are dispersed in Spain and in France. So the territorial base of this nation is shared by Spain and France. So if you go, for example, to Spain, to the Sagrada Familia, that's a very popular church or building in Spain, that is located in the part where the Basque nation is located, and they have a very strong nationalistic feeling, and sometimes they also have a separatist tendencies. Then you also have the civic nation. A civic nation is based on shared political values and citizenship rather than ethnicity. So these are ang mga bansang ito yung mga bansa na kung saan ang kanilang mga tao ay iba-iba ang origin, kaya ethnicity or kaya political values nila, but they share the same identity, or their loyalty is to their country, to their state. That's why they consider themselves a nation. Example is the United States of America. So people living in the United States of America and enjoy the citizenship of the USA, they call themselves Americans. Whether their ancestry is from Ireland, from the UK, or from Pakistan, or from India, or from the Philippines, or whatever country, they all consider themselves Americans. Then there is also a stateless nation, a nation without its own sovereign state. Example of this are the Palestinians. They seek recognition as an independent state. So you can see from this map, you see the map of Spain and France. So you have here the Basque region, the Basque country. So it covers, it overlaps with the territory of Spain and France. So, for example, these famous cities in Spain like Bilbao, San Sebastian, etc., or Pamplona. These are cities that are found in the Basque country of Spain, and they also have a population in France. So this is an example of an ethnic nation. Then this is also an example of the civic nation, the United States. So you will find here the different colors designated kung saan mas marami yung population, ethnic population sa lugar na ito. They are all dispersed in the United States. So multi-ethnic, but they identify themselves as a single nation, which is the United States of America, or simply they call themselves Americans. So, example ng mga stateless nation, of course, nilagay ko dito yung is blank kasi wala naman silang stateless nation, yung Palestine, for example. Now, let's go to the third term. Kasi dito sa lecture natin, dinidistinguish natin yung ano ang pagkakaiba ng state, ano ang nation, ano ang nation state. Kasi minsan yung word na nation at saka state are used interchangeably. Minsan yung mga writers o kaya mga lecturers, sinasabi nila nation state, they mean the same thing, but actually they are different. Ngayon, itong tinatawag natin na nation state na mayroong hyphen is a contemporary development. Yan, it is a contemporary development. So there are keywords in this explanation. So we say that a nation state is a sovereign political entity where the majority of the population shares a common national identity, culture, language, or history, and where the government has a recognized authority over a defined territory. So let us try to unmask, or let us try to deconstruct these terms that we are saying here. So sovereign, this is it means the entity has supreme and independent authority over its own affairs, both internally and externally in relation to other states. Then, sovereignty implies that no external power has the right to interfere in its governance. So we're trying here to define the sovereign political entity. Yan. Then, next, let us try to look into the meaning of political entity. Yan. Let's try to look into the meaning of political entity. So a political entity is a structured and organized system of governance that includes institutions such as government, laws, and political leadership. This distinguishes it from purely cultural or ethnic groups. Then also, we have the term majority of the population. So, anong ibig sabihin nito? So, a significant portion of the people living in the territory share cultural, linguistic, or historical characteristics which contribute to a sense of national unity. And number 4, we have the term common national identity. So, common national identity. So, anong ibig sabihin ng common national identity? Okay. So, this means that the shared sense of belonging and collective identity among the people of the state, and this could be based on ethnicity, shared values, or historical experiences. Then we have culture, the customs and tradition, beliefs, and social practices that shape a group's way of life. Culture plays a key role in unifying a population within a nation-state. And then language is a common language, facilitates communication and national cohesion. While some nation-states have multiple languages, one dominant language often serves as a unifying factor. So, for example, ang modern state, for example, halimbawa may mga countries na dalawa ang ethnicity nila. For example, if you go to Belgium, ang Belgium ay may mga parts dyan na French ang ginagamit at may part dyan na ibang language ang ginagamit nila o German ang ginagamit nila, because there are two main nationalities found, linguistic nationalities. So, pero meron silang common language which is recognized by the government. Okay. Then history, a shared historical experience including common struggles, victories, or myth, and helps solidify national identity and distinguish one nation from another. So, ibig sabihin, ang nation-state na yan ay meron siyang kasaysayan na nakapalaman sa kanilang mga history books, mga textbook na pinapalaganap at itinatanim sa national consciousness nila. Okay. Then you also have the government. So dapat there should be an organized political authority that establishes and enforces law, policy, and governance structure. This is essential for maintaining order and sovereignty. So then another is recognized authority. The government is acknowledged both internally by its people and externally by other states and international organizations as having a legitimate control over the nation state. So therefore, kung susuriin natin from the political point of view, a nation state can be considered as a nation state if there is a functioning government or authority. And at the same time, that nation state must be recognized by at least the superpowers. Yan, halimbawa, ang isang state, pag nag-declare siya ng independence, dapat mag-extend ng recognition at least isa sa mga superpowers na country sa world to recognize the existence of that state. Kasi may mga state kasi na nag-exist de facto kasi ang existence ng state nakabatay siya sa dalawang uri. Yung tinatawag natin na de facto and de jure. These are Latin terms. Pag sinabi natin na de facto, ibig sabihin by the fact. Pag de jure naman is by the law. So ibig sabihin, may mga bansa or may mga nation state na nag-exist sila de facto. So ibig sabihin, by its own very existence, by the elements of what constitute a state, nagpa-function sila as a state, but they are not recognized by the international community. or there are no major powers recognizing them. Kumbaga, nag-i-exist sila by the fact, but there is no legal basis for their existence. Anong example nito? For example, Taiwan. Taiwan is a de facto state. It's like a state, but it is not recognized by the major powers. So therefore, yung mga major powers, they consider Taiwan as part of China. So in other words, ang Taiwan is an example of a country na nag-exist pero wala siyang international recognition. Then another is, of course, a nation state must have a defined territory. So ang territory nito, it could be homogeneous or it could be contagious. Ibig sabihin, may mga countries na watak-watak yung kanilang territory. May mga countries naman na bilog yung kanilang territory. So it depends upon. Pero yung watak-watak, ano lang yung kaunti lang yun. Pero karamihan sa mga bansa ay contiguous naman yung kanilang mga territory. The most important is that the country or the government of that country holds control over its territory. Yan. So, kung susumadahin natin, ang term na nation state ay isang bagong concept sa panahon natin ngayon, especially during the post-World War II concept. Kasi noon, sa Europe noon, yung mga states doon ay sometimes they are considered nation, sometimes they are considered a state. Pero sa panahon natin, nabuo yung nation state kasi especially after the decolonization policy of the United Nations, yung mga countries na mga formerly colonies of the major powers in Europe became independent. Yung mga territories ng mga new states nito, mga bagong country na to, are arranged not according to ethnicity but rather according to the economic interest and control of the former countries that control them. Kaya makikita mo sa isang territory, halimbawa sa Pilipinas, dati we are formerly the territory of the United States. So halo-halo yung mga population natin dito. Kasama natin yung mga tao doon sa Mindanao. The same also with Indonesia, for example. Ang Indonesia is an example of a multi-ethnic country kasi maraming nationalities ang nandiyan sa loob ng kanyang territory, pero ang nag-define ng kanyang territory ay yung kanyang former colonizer, which is the Dutch, because itong Indonesia noon were under the control of the Dutch prior to the Second World War. So ngayon, pag sinabi nating nation state, it is now a new parang isa siyang bagong sense of loyalty and identification. For example, if we are in a particular country or a nation state, we identify ourselves as member of that nation state. Halimbawa ako ay Pilipino, tapos nag-migrate ako sa United States at na-acquire ko ang American citizenship. So, kahit ako Pilipino, sinasabi ko na ang loyalty ko ay nasa United States of America or I am an American. So, halimbawa naman ikaw ay halimbawa naman yung mga countries na may dalawang kasi may mga countries kasi na isang nationality pero several states, like for example North Korea, South Korea. Yung mga nandoon sa South Korea, they consider themselves Korean. Yung mga nandoon sa North, Korean din ang tingin nila sa sarili nila, but their loyalty is to their government or to their country, to the government of South Korea or to the government of North Korea. Those are just examples that I am sharing with you. So unlike the classical definition, which assume a perfect overlap between nation, cultural identity, and state or political entity, the modern definition recognizes that, first, most nation states today are multicultural and multi-ethnic, rather than ethnically or culturally homogeneous. So yan ang characteristics ng mga modern states ngayon. So they are multicultural and multi-ethnic, karamihan or hindi naman lahat, kasi may mga countries naman na solid naman yung kanilang population. Isang halimbawa, pag pumunta ka sa Japan, Japan is not a multi-ethnic, but rather it is homogeneous. Isa lang naman ang nandoon sa kanila, mga Japanese. But if you go to India, for example, sa India, marami silang nationality doon. If you go to China, marami din silang nationality, but they identify themselves as Chinese. Kasi sa China, marami silang mga doon, meron silang mga Tibetan, meron silang mga Han, Iba-ibang klaseng mga nationality ang nandoon. Okay. But they identify themselves as Chinese or belonging to China. Then, second, globalization, migration, and regional integration challenge the traditional nation-state model, making national identity more fluid. Yeah, so isang epekto ng globalization ay yung migration. Yung mga tao ay nagma-migrate. Sabi nga natin, kung saan mayroong opportunity, nagkakaroon ng opportunity rin o kaya impetus sa mga population from other countries to move to another country. Like for example, halimbawa, sa Western Europe at saka sa United States at saka sa Canada, makikita natin ang napakaraming cases ng migration from third world countries. Kaya makikita mo, maybe 50 years ago, ang population ng America are mostly Caucasian. Ito yung mga migrants coming from Europe, coming from UK, coming from Ireland, or coming from Spain. Pero sa panahon natin ngayon, makikita natin na napakarami ng mga migrants coming from South America and coming from Asian countries. Kaya makikita mo, even yung language ng US nagbabago rin. Although dominant pa rin yung English because it is the common language in the US, pero a large part of the population of the US are Spanish speaking because some of them are coming from South America, coming from Mexico, coming from Central America, etc., etc. Okay. Sa Europe ngayon, for example, sa Western Europe, ang problema nila doon is migration. Kaya nga nagkakaroon na sila ng problema doon. Kaya kung kayo ay nakinig doon sa speech ni Donald Trump sa United Nations General Assembly, ipinapaliwanag niya, sinasabi niya, kinakastigate niya yung mga European. Sabi nila, if you continue to practice open border and if you do not control migration, eventually, yung mga pinaghirapan ninyo to establish a well-ordered society, free from crime, yan, mawawala yan because yung mga migrants na pumupunta sa inyo ay some of them are criminal elements and sometimes they cannot integrate into society and they create social and economic problem and even political problems for the host country. Yan. So, ang panawagan ni Donald Trump ay tawag doon i-manage at i-control ang migration. Okay. So another is third is the modern nation states derive legitimacy from citizenship and legal structure, not just cultural or ethnic unity. So ibig sabihin, ang composition ng nation state ngayon is based on citizenship and of course the constitution, which is the main legal structure of the existence of that country. So ito, yan ang pinag-usapan natin. So ito naman, let's look at the characteristics of the modern nation state. So number one, sovereignty. Sovereignty, the nation state has full control over the law, the governance, and international relations within its borders. However, globalization has weakened sovereignty due to the international organizations like the UN, EU, and WTO. Ang sovereignty is one characteristics of a state, 'di ba? Yung pag sinabi nating sovereignty, ibig sabihin the full power and control of a particular nation to their state. Kaya lang itong full control nasa-challenge siya kasi may mga international body na chini-chip in niya yung power ng state. Like for example, yung sa ICC, 'di ba? Pag sinabi nating sovereignty, yung isang country ay meron siyang karapatan. Siya lang ang may karapatan na maglitis at magbigay hustisya sa kanyang mga citizens. Pero pag ang country na yan ay nagpabilang siya sa ICC, may time din na yung mga citizen niya, some of their citizens can be accused sa ICC na kung saan nagkakaroon ng jurisdiction yung ICC doon sa taong yun. Kumbaga it's a form of violation of sovereignty, pero it is something that recognized and accepted. Yan. Then another is a modern nation state has a defined border. Hindi pwede yung nation state na imaginary ang border mo. Dapat meron talaga actual. So a modern nation state has a recognized and internationally accepted borders. Some exceptions exist, such as the disputed territories, like for example in Israel and Palestine, na hindi pa masyadong define yung ano, kasi may mga parts doon na occupied by Israel. Then also about Taiwan, for example, kasi ang Taiwan wala naman siyang sovereignty, pero parang nag-exist siyang as an independent country, pero internationally hindi siya considered na independent country. Then you also have the problem of Kashmir. This is located in northern India and bordering with Pakistan. Meron silang territorial dispute doon. Then third is common identity, but not always homogeneous. A sense of national identity binds the citizen together, though it is often multicultural rather than monoethnic. Example, the United States, Canada, and India. These are all multi-ethnic nation states. Then, fourth is citizenship and legal identity. The modern nation states emphasize legal citizenship rather than ethnicity as the basis for belonging. Example, France grants citizenship based on French civic values, not ethnicity. So another is decentralized. Another characteristics is centralized government. The state governs through institutions. For example, the law, yung kanilang constitution, at saka yung mga municipal laws nila. Then military, taxes, and public services. Some nation states have federal systems like the USA, Germany, where power is decentralized. Meaning to say, yung mga states nila are in charge with local government, while yung central government or yung federal government naman ang nagte-take charge ng defense at saka foreign relations. Okay. Then another is characteristics is the economic and political integration in a globalized world. So nation states cooperate through international agreements, sometimes at the cost of sovereignty. Example, the European Union members share economic policies but still retain national governance. So, tingnan ninyo itong graph na ginawa ko. So, how the modern nation state differs from the classical model. Yan, so the classical model. Ang pag sinabi natin classical model, ito yung mga pre-World War II na mga entities noon. So, you have the classical nation state, 18th century, the modern nation state, 21st century. Yung identity is ethnically and culturally homogeneous, then the modern state is multicultural and multi-ethnic. When it comes to sovereignty, noong unang panahon, as influenced by the old regime, the countries are fully independent and they control all the policies. But in a modern state, it is impossible to do that because there are shared sovereignty. Like, for example, if you are a member of the United Nations, then you will have to comply with its requirement. Then, sa mga European countries naman, where members of the EU, they have trade agreements and they have different kinds of agreement. Then citizenship, ngayon sa panahon natin sa modern nation state, ang batayan ng citizenship ay hindi na sa lahi mo, kundi rather it is based on legal and civic identity. So ito naman yung impact ng globalization. So sa panahon natin ngayon, highly interconnected na ang mga countries. Hindi katulad noon. Noong unang panahon, yung mga countries, pwede silang magsabi na independent kami. Hindi kami umaasa sa iba. Pero sa panahon natin ngayon, walang country, no country in the world could claim na sila ay they can exist on their own. Then ito mga examples, like for example 19th century France and Germany, yan mga national mga national states yan. Ito naman sa modern state, we have USA, Canada, India, UK, and modern France na kung saan naging multi-ethnic na sila. So, I have a simple question. Is the nation state getting weaker considering globalization? So, nakikita natin na sinabi ko kanina yung integration ng mga bansa ay nagiging malakas ngayon. So, ano ang impact nito sa sovereign power ng mga nation state? Nababawasan ba ang kanilang autonomy at saka sovereignty? So, is the concept of the state getting weaker in light of regionalization and globalization? So, if you can see from the illustration on the slide, you will see the different regions of the world. Itong red dito sa left side is, of course, the North America. Then, on the lower part is South America. You also see East Africa and West Africa. And you also have the South Asia, Southeast Asia, and also Northeast Asia. So the concept of the state or a sovereign political entity with defined borders and authority over its people is evolving due to the forces of regionalization and globalization. While some argue that states are weakening, others contend that they are simply adapting to the new global realities. So let's explore this perspective. So pag sinabi nating regionalization, ibig sabihin, ito yung pag-i-integrate ng mga regions, like for example in Southeast Asia where we belong. So nandito tayo sa part na to. So we are here on this we are here on this part that is Southeast Asia. And in Southeast Asia, you will find out that there is one important regional organization, which is the ASEAN, or that's the acronym for Association of Southeast Asian Nations, made up of the 10 member states, 10 member states, and also one observer, which is Timor-Leste. So, in other words, these littoral states in Asia have formed themselves into an organization. So, there are certain forms of cooperation wherein they have to compromise their sovereignty in order to maintain this organization. And more strongly, isang example dito ay itong sa Europe, sa Western Europe, you have the EU or the the European Union. So the European Union. So this aims at the integration of the economy and also some political aspects of the lives of the different countries in Western Europe. Okay, so let's explore further. So let's examine two arguments. The states are becoming weaker versus the state are becoming stronger. So let's first deal with the argument that states are getting weaker. So a globalization reduces state sovereignty. So you have economic globalization. So we see the transnational corporations or the TNCs and international organizations like the IMF, WTO, and World Bank influence national economies and sometimes bypassing state control. Example, you have the Apple, Amazon, and the Google have economic power greater than some small nations. And also, we see the financial markets. Countries depend on the global financial institutions, limiting their control over economic policies. And a special example, in 2008, the financial crisis forced bailouts and reforms. So, itong tinatawag natin na globalization ay nare-reduce nito ang power ng mga states. Kasi like for example, halimbawa sa world trade, we cannot just decide on our own. We cannot make a unilateral decision because like for example, all of us are members of the World Trade Organization. Itong World Trade Organizations promotes free trade, but at the same time, it also creates rules for member states. Kumbaga, itong WTO is a bandwagon, meaning to say, almost all countries of the world are member of the WTO, because you cannot conduct your business and you cannot succeed in global trade if you are not a member of the WTO. So in other words, decisions coming from the WTO or policies are sometimes affect or infringe on the sovereignty of countries. Then you also have the IMF World Bank. Itong IMF World Bank is a financial institution that was created after World War II. Kasi noong World War II ay na-devastated yung mga countries sa Europe, na-devastated yung ibang mga bansa sa Asia and Africa, and most of them need some seed capital in order to be able to start again their economy. And that's the reason why the IMF World Bank was established, not only to regulate the monetary system, but also to provide incentive and to provide help for developing countries. Kaya lang, ang problema dyan is, once you borrow money from the World Bank or once the World Bank finance your projects, you are bound by certain conditionalities. Okay. So, yun ang mga dilemma, kumbaga, example na binigay ng mga tao na ang kanilang argument is that the state is getting weaker because these organizations are imposing itself upon the states. Not only this organization, but also TNCs, yung transnational corporations. Yan, halimbawa itong Apple, Amazon, Google, and they are becoming tech giants, especially when it comes to communication, and they can be more powerful than the smaller countries. So another is regionalization challenges state autonomy. Regional organizations like the European Union or ASEAN or the African Union reduce the absolute power of individual states. Example, EU members share sovereignty over trade, immigration, and human rights policies. Yan. Kaya sa Europe, yung mga bansang member ng EU, nag-i-impose ang EU ng mga policies and regulations to them. Lalong-lalo na sa trade, immigration, and also yung mga human rights policies nila. So, another oddity in this kind of relationship is the Brexit, or the United Kingdom leaving the European Union. Sometime several years ago, Great Britain decided to leave or withdraw from the EU because of certain problems that medyo nahirapan ang Great Britain kasi nga nag-i-impact ito sa kanilang economy, and to think that Great Britain has a huge economy compared to the other European countries. So, letter C, the supranational organization and international law, for example, the United Nations and the International Criminal Court or ICC and the World Trade Organization impose international regulations that override national law. So in other words, there are certain local laws that run into conflict with the UN, ICC, and WTO, and sometimes problems are created. Example, the ICC prosecutes leaders like, for example, Sudan's Omar al-Bashir for crimes even if their state opposes it. Okay. So letter D, migration and cultural globalization undermine national identity. So you have mass immigration, makes state more multicultural, complicating the idea of a single national identity. And example are the refugee crisis in Europe, challenges border control, and national policies. Kaya nagkakaproblema sila doon sa European Union, sa EU, kasi nga yung EU may policy ng open borders. Now, some countries, some member countries of the European Union are realizing the problem. Halimbawa, for example, Poland is a member of the EU, but Poland does not follow the policies of EU. They continue to restrict immigration because they said they have to protect their national sovereignty and they have to protect their people. Okay, so that's one example. So, letter E, cyber and digital globalization bypass the state. So, yung mga nakikita natin ng mga social media, the internet, cryptocurrencies are now dominating the relationship among people and among nations. And these are actually things that has no borders. Kaya itong mga social media, yung ating mga bagong forms of communications are impacting our the way government are being run and also the way public opinions are developed. So, let's go now to the counter argument, the argument that states are adapting or not weakening. So there are several points that were raised by this opposing camp. Sabi nila, letter A, the state still controls the key functions. So national governments still control the law, security, and policies within the territories. Example, despite of globalization, China maintains strict state control over its economy, internet, and political system. So kahit nga malakas ang borderless ang mga communications natin, internet, minsan may mga states na kinokontrol pa rin nila ito because they know that information is power and it can impact on their the well-being or the way they run their societies and government. The second point is regionalization strengthens states through cooperation. So, regional agreements like, for example, the ASEAN and EU can enhance a state's influence rather than weaken it. Because sometimes itong mga member countries of this organization looks at these organizations as the platform where they can throw their weight around. So, example, ASEAN gives small Southeast Asian states greater negotiating power, especially when it comes to global trade. Kasi sa larangan ng global trade, sometimes may mga malalaking economy like for example the United States, Japan, Brazil or India, etc. So if you are a small state, you will find it very difficult to negotiate trade deals with this country. So, but if you are a member of an organization or association, you will have the opportunity to bargain with this organizations or countries. And letter C is the rise of nationalism as a response to globalization. So many states are pushing back against globalization by reasserting national sovereignty. Example, Donald Trump's America First policy withdrew the U.S. from international agreements. So like for example, the United States withdrew from UNESCO. So Russia and China also promote nationalism to resist Western influence. Then letter D, we have the security concerns reinforce the state's role. So we have this problem of terrorism, pandemics, and the cyber threats show that states are still central in protecting their citizens. So example, the COVID-19 pandemic saw states reinforcing border control and national healthcare policies. Then letter E, we have the digital sovereignty is a new form of state power. So states now regulate cyberspace, social media, and AI to maintain control. Example, China's Great Firewall restricts foreign digital influence. Kaya makikita mo pa itong mga system na ginawa ng China ay isa itong paraan para mapigilan ang paglaganap ng free information na which they consider very dangerous for their national security. So they have created programs, they have created certain applications in the World Wide Web that will restrict the inflow or appearance of information coming from the outside. So, ito ang ating conclusion based on this debate. The state is transforming, not disappearing. So, the classical nation-state model, absolute sovereignty, is no longer realistic. So, instead, states are adapting by shaping power regionally and engaging in global networks while maintaining key functions. Some states are even reasserting their power in response to globalization. Example, China and Russia. Thus, rather than becoming weaker, the state is evolving into a more flexible and interconnected entity. So, some cases to consider, we have the United Kingdom, China, the United States, Russia, and ASEAN. So, example, the European Union uh, and the United Kingdom, a case study of the Brexit, reclaiming national sovereignty. So the UK was a member of the EU for decades, but they voted to leave in 2016. So the reasons for leaving are that the UK wanted greater control over immigration laws and trade, and many Britons felt that the EU was imposing regulations that limit UK sovereignty. So what is the impact of this exit by the British? So the UK regained control over its laws and trade policies. However, Brexit weakened the UK's economy and global influence. Okay. So here is China, the case study, controlling globalization while benefiting from it. So, kumbaga, paradoxical ang posisyon ng China dito. Bakit paradoxical? Kasi parang contradictory. They are trying to control or restrict globalization, pero they are benefiting from the outcome of globalization. So, China has embraced economic globalization while at the same time maintaining strong state control over its economy and society. So the key strategies are imposed by China are the One Belt or One Road initiative, which expands China's influence through global infrastructure and projects. Then, second is the state control capitalism. The government controls major industries while allowing some market reforms. And letter E, digital sovereignty. China restricts foreign internet services, example Google, Facebook, while promoting domestic platforms, example like WeChat and Alibaba. So, kumbaga, ano rin ito, they're trying to control social media platforms, and at the same time, they are creating alternatives which will allow their people to reconnect itself and will also allow them to spy on their people. So, the lesson is, unlike Western democracy, China proves that a strong state can benefit from globalization without losing control. Now, the case study of the United States is nationalism versus global engagement. So, dito na papasok yung policy ni Donald Trump na America First. So, kumbaga, America is declaring war against globalization. So, the U.S. has historically led globalization efforts like the founding of the WTO, the United Nations, and NATO. However, under Donald Trump's the America First policy, it focused on trade protectionism. Example, the tariffs. Then second, withdrawal from global agreements. Kumbaga, umalis ang US dun sa Paris Climate Accord and WHO, World Health Organization, and recently the UNESCO. Then third, tighter immigration policy. So the US has imposed tight restrictions on immigration. So what is the impact of this situation where the United States is found? So while the US gained short-term domestic control, it lost global influence, allowing China and the EU to take leadership in trade and diplomacy. So ito naman sa Russia asserting state sovereignty in a globalized world. So Russia under Vladimir Putin effectively restrict Western-led globalization, seeing it as a threat to sovereignty. So the key actions are rejecting Western economic models, regionalization with the BRICS, and intervention in cyber and information warfare. So what's the impact of this? What's the impact of this policy of China? So Russia remains independent from Western financial institution but suffers economic sanctions. Kasi nga yung war in Ukraine, nagkaroon ng sanctions ang Russia. So kaya nahihirapan siyang i-export yung kanyang mga mineral products like oil because nga of this sanction imposed on her as a result of the war that they waged against Ukraine. Okay. So what are the lessons that can be found in this case study? States that resist globalization entirely face economic and diplomatic isolation. However, Russia successfully uses regional and digital strategies to maintain their influence. So ito naman dito sa atin sa ASEAN, the regional bloc that enhances state power. So the Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN shows how regional cooperation strengthens individual states. So the key benefits for member states are economic cooperation, collective bargaining power, non-interference policy. So what are the lessons gained from this? So ASEAN shows that regionalization does not weaken the state but instead enhances their global standing without sacrificing their sovereignty. Here are some of my takeaway from this case study. So United Kingdom, which withdrew from the regionalization, ano ang naging outcome? They gained sovereignty but lost their economic benefit. So we have China, controlled globalization while maintaining state power. So the outcome is a strong global economy while keeping political control. Then you have the United States. So shifted from globalization to nationalism. And the outcome is it lost the influence but regained some domestic control. Then Russia resisted Western globalization and sought regional alliances. So the outcome is they were able to maintain their sovereignty but faces economic sanctions. Now, as to ASEAN, it uses regionalization to strengthen the states. The outcome is that it enhances state power without weakening sovereignty. So, final conclusion is to the question, is the state weaker? No, but it is evolving. Some states resist globalization and face the challenges. Others adapt and use regionalization to their advantage. And the strongest state balance both globalization and sovereignty to maintain influence. So thank you very much for listening to this short lecture.